Before I let Russ do the intro, I'm going to throw my 2 cents out here and thank you for being part of this event, and also thank you for being part of the Central Indiana Railroad Ops, otherwise known as CIROPS, a few years ago, when Russ Weiss, Ron Ellison, Rob Cooper, and myself were able to spend an evening operating with your crew. We all walked out of there going, wow. And I came home and told Barbara that this is probably in the top 5 of all layouts I've ever operated on. For the rest of the crew here, you're going to have a great tour of the layout and good information on signals. Russ, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to go mute myself.
Thanks, Fred. Well, Fred took most of what I was going to say. Please join me welcoming Tom. He has what Fred just said. We went away from Tom's house that evening, and we said, "Hey, how about can we skip the layouts tomorrow and go back to Tom's that runs so flawlessly?" And the frosting on the cake is the signaling, and that was really fun. So Tom's up with the Central Indiana division, so we appreciate him taking the time to talk to us down here. So Tom, I'll let you take it away, and thanks for doing this.
All right, you're very welcome. Thank you for your kind words. Can you all hear me very well? Are you hearing me?
Oh yeah, sounds great.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks for the kind words. My hat is off to you for the way you guys conduct a division meeting, and Fred, if you'll send me the link to your meeting, I'll forward that to our CID superintendent. Not that there's anything wrong with the way he does meetings, but you might enjoy seeing the way somebody else does it too.
Yeah, Dan and I talk frequently, but I'll send that to you, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Well, my presentation here, one of the things that may help you in viewing it, in the right hand of your screen, if you are seeing yourself and other participants, you might go to the very top of that and just select the one little line there, and that'll take everybody's image out, and that'll give you full access to the screen. What I want to do is talk about how I added signals to the Eastern Illinois Santa Fe, and I'm going to talk about kind of how signals work and how the choices you might have when it comes to choosing software or hardware to put it together with, and then also a little bit of how I use the software and how I use some of the components to put the signaling on the layout. So it's a lot, so let's get started. Well, the goal for adding signals to my layout is to provide signal indication for the occupied blocks and indication for evidence of one block beyond the signal, show crossover status, and to show status of oncoming trains, and provide for prototype operation. There's 3 different kinds of systems at least: ABS, automatic block system, absolute permissive block system, centralized traffic control. ABS, basically red means stop. There's a train in that block. Yellow, maybe you need to stop in the next block. Green means you can proceed. APB, here's what I got off the internet. You can go to Google and read that yourself. Centralized traffic control is where the dispatcher sets the signals or sets the turnouts that actually controls movements on the railroad. And what I have is most closely resembles a CTC type of a system. This is really hard to see, but this is the schematic of my railroad. Since everything is such fine print, let's just start looking at one segment of that. This is the west end of my layout. And as you look at the top lines, those are the tracks, and you can see crossovers and sidings there. So you've got the community of Streeter with its sidings and a crossover there, and Ransom, and then to the very far right, Verona. Below those, you'll see the yellow arrows or the blue arrows or the red, and those are the blocks. And then the black arrow at the very bottom is the power bus. So the power bus is coming from the control system, DCC control system, and then the individual blocks are fed from that black, the bus. And then there are a number of wires that go from the blocks up to different places on the track. Here's the next section, and this is Ransom and Verona, and they're still being fed off that one single power district, the black line below. Here we're progressing eastward on the layout. You see more blocks there: Maison, Coal City, Kankakee River, west of Joliet, and then Joliet itself. And you can see kind of how busy that area is there. What you see here is two different power districts. I've actually added a third power district now, which I'm not showing here because it's mainly just all of staging. Since I now have about 40 sound locomotives on the layout, it just helps to have another power district to distribute all that power. We're going to look at what the dispatcher sees when they're going to follow a train across the layout. This is the dispatcher panel. This is created in NMRA, and this is what I see on my computer. Joliet on the top right, and that's the easternmost end of the layout. And then at the bottom, you'll see Streeter. The little dotted lines kind of connect those sections. You can see the signals there at the different locations. And right now, as we look at this, there are no trains on the layout. So we're going to bring a train onto the layout. The little marker there, 3698, that's for a local train that's going to be going westbound. And as it sits there right now, it's not entered any of the detection blocks. But we bring it forward, and now you can see that the track has changed color from black to red. And the signal lights that would protect that section of track are now showing red for a train that would be coming on that track, or yellow when further blocked down the direction. I'm going to kind of just take a break here. Is this all making sense to everybody? Raise your hand or let Fred or Ron know, and they can get back to me if I'm talking too fast or if anybody has a question. All right, I will continue.
No questions so far coming up in chat, Tom.
Okay.
So you must be doing okay.
All right, here we go. Let's move that train down the dispatcher panel. So you can see it's moved from just Joliet to the area that's west of Joliet. So now this train is actually in two different blocks. So we see that the signal as it crossed turned red. This one is still red. And now this one is turned red, and over here we have a yellow light. And as the train moves, the signals just keep moving ahead of time. I realize now it's kind of hard to show the arrows going all the way up, but this red line is actually pointing at this signal here that's turned red. And then here you got the yellow down here. And let's move along one more section. After the train has gone, you're going to start seeing blocks turning green for back where this train came from. And you can see other blocks down here anticipating its movement. And you can see more changes in the lights as this train is moving westward. Now let's translate that into what this really looks like. Here is that, this is control point 48, and this is the green signal. This is the signal for the main 1 track that's over here, and this is a signal for main 2. Let's see what happens when we got trains coming. As soon as that train goes by that signal, it goes to red. One of the unfortunate things about Zoom is videos, I think, end up being kind of herky-jerky. You can see some of the same videos by going to my YouTube channels. Might look a little bit cleaner. You saw that train kind of disappearing off in the distance, and when it gets out of that block, that signal goes to yellow. It's going to kind of sound like that train's coming back at you, but it's where it's reached on the layout that's just kind of to the side of this area. But clearly, when that train gets far enough away, it leaves even that other distant block, and the signal will return to green. There we go. Now we're going to look again at signal milepost 48 looking east, where we're going to have 2 trains involved in this video. Right now we can see everything's green. When that train goes by, that signal turned to red. You're going to see the signal on main 1 turn yellow because there's a train coming. So that train on main 1 is 1 block away right now, which is why that signal turned to yellow. And it's going to turn red when the train is actually in that block. Here it comes.
Hey, Tom,
Yes.
I have one question here from a member. Do the control point numbers relate to the mile markers?
Yes, they do.
Thank you.
That signal's turned green because that train's left that block, and if needed to back up or if a train appeared that wanted to go that direction, it could. And on the right, we see that that signal has changed to yellow because that train is 1 block away and he's about to leave that block, which will return everything to green. And it's green. All right, now we're going to kind of like look at what those things looked like to the dispatcher when the trains were doing some of these moves. This is a different, we're going to do a crossover function or action here. So I've got train 518 who's on main south, which is also main 2, and he's going to cross over onto main north. And this signal here has been thrown, so he's got a red over green. The top signal is also what you would do if you were going to go straight on that track, which it's not going to do because you're going to cross over. So the lower indication indicates you're going to proceed on the other track. Over here, everything is red because anything on this track has a train coming right at it. And this track would have to stop here because the turnout is thrown against it. And you can also see down here, you have a yellow on the main north, and you have a yellow over red here, which is saying you only have one more block that you can travel. This shows what happens when the train has crossed over. So this signal is showing red. This one is still yellow over red. And everything's red at this intersection or this control point because that's where all the activity is going on. Train has crossed over at this point, and you can see behind the train you have a red over green, but you can see again the same thing we talked about before. This train is seeing red signals. I mean, it's creating red signals. All right. Let's see what that looked like. Before I start the motion here, you can see that the signals are green over red, which means that all trains would be going, if they were traveling towards the signal, they would be staying on their tracks. But the dispatcher is right away, when I throw this or start this video, you'll see that the indication changes. This is going to go to red because the turnout's thrown against it, and this one, red, says he's not going to continue on the same track. This will go to green, which means he's going to cross over. There's the change. And now we're going to look at that same activity from the other direction. And here, all the signals are red because this track has the turnout thrown against it, and this track has a train coming right at it. This is what it looked like to the dispatcher after that train had crossed over. And this signal has been returned to normal, so everything's green over red. I think I can't remember why I put this in there, but hopefully it's self-explanatory. Oh, here's a video of the train making a move back to the the main that it was on. And at this point, you can see green over red, and here that train is coming. He's coming on that track. Dispatcher has not changed this yet, but you'll see that happen in just a minute. You look at the track, you'll see the track change with the signal. There you go. Everything's red.
Tom,
Yes.
did you like follow any Santa Fe, rule book, or when you were, setting up the signals, or is this just standard signal indications?
Good question. What you're seeing here is a basic signal, which is just basically each one block has one value, which means it's red, then yellow, then green. I've changed to using the Santa Fe 1995 signal aspects. And I think, let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 different aspects that can be shown. And I do have a handout that's given to people so they can follow that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, actually, I'll share a little bit about that as we go along here. We're going to kind of talk about actually putting in the signals down. And what does it take to do add signals? Well, one thing is we have to know where trains are. So we need to have a way to detect the location of the trains. By that, we need to create blocks on the railroad. And then we need to communicate evidence of that detection in that block for processing. And then we have to process that either computer or with electronically, and then manage the logic of train location and the way the track is lined up. And then we have to send that message back to the signals for the layout. So we're going to have electrical hardware or computer logic. And I use JMRI, which basically takes a minimum of electrical hardware and uses the computer to process the logic. These are some of the components. I'm using Team Digital. There are a number of other companies. I'm going to mention a couple of those here in a minute. Team Digital is managed by a fellow here up in Kokomo. So he's only about 40 miles from me. And this is what his block detector looks like. That'll do 2 blocks. That's what it looks like on the layout. You can see the 2 white wires, one from each block going through that sensor. Sometimes you hear about how many rounds do you have to run through that detector to catch the current. It just takes one for my layout. This is a block D8, so this can manage 8 blocks. And this is what it looks like on my layout. I have one particular place where a lot of the blocks, because they're on a peninsula, can all be fed from one location. So this was a real useful way to manage that. Then you have to take that detection from those block detectors and have a way of sending that to the computer. So here's the Signal Indication Controller, SIC board. And here's a SIC board at another end of the layout that's taking 2 different block detectors, and all the wires go to it. And then you see these wires that come out at the bottom. One is connected to the other SIC board, and the other one goes to the computer. And it goes to the computer by the way of a RR circuits local buffer USB. And there it is, just right there next to the computer. This is a little bit about how that all looks together. This is a bigger image of it. Right here, we can see the block D8 goes to the local buffer, to the computer. Here's my DCC command station, and then it sends the signal control by the track bus. One thing I did learn is that this track signal power bus has to be separate from the track bus, or at least has to be separate of the detection, because just the LEDs and the signals look as much like a locomotive as anything else to the control system. This is the signal head driver. I'm showing everything you get from Team Digital. I didn't use these connectors or that's heat shrink tubing. This is what it looks like installed in the layout. This is the connection to the track bus, and then I've got the wires to the power of the signal head decoder, and then the connections that go to the signals. Like I said, there's 2 basic theories of how to do it. One is using your computer, and the other is electrical hardware. Some of the other components, NCE has track detection. Our circuits has track detection, and they have a complete system. And I know there's also integrated signal systems out there, and they have a system. I didn't look at it that closely, but I know that they have a working system that other people have used. Then there's Bruce Chubb's CMRI system, and it's pretty much all electronic hardware. So in other words, everything is built into it. So you connect it up to the blocks, and everything's connected to the whole system, and it does everything without using your computer. And it's more electrical hardware heavy in its system. There's some examples of their circuit boards. Here's another installation, and I felt like I could understand the computer setup more easily than this, and I do believe that this was a little bit more expensive than the way I went using JMRI. So we're going to talk a little bit about how I did the JMRI setup, personal computer, and the JMRI has what's called simple signaling logic. So one of the things we're going to do is create sensors, create blocks, create signal heads and signal masks, and then use the computer to discover logic. This is what, if you get Panel Pro loaded on your computer, this is what the basic Panel Pro screen looks like. And then this, what you can see here is I have selected in the Tools section, tables, and then sensors. I'm going to try, you're not going to be able to learn how to do this just from watching this clinic, because there's a lot to this and there's a lot to remember, but this gives you a little idea of what's involved in it. But you get your sensors and you create a table for your sensors, and then you're going to create blocks. In my layout, because it's the size of it, the sensors and the blocks essentially have the same name. One of the neat things is after you take your, you have to program your SIC board to identify the different blocks, and you're going to program it the same way you would program a stationary decoder. And you're going to create numbers for them. And as soon as you literally hook that up and run a train through the layout, it will create these sensor names in this column here. And then you're going to come back in the computer and create the names that identify those different blocks. Okay, now we've got tables, signals, and we're going to do signal heads. And this is a list of some of the signal heads on my layout. And you can see someone asked again about the control points, and they are basically the milepost where that control point is located. And that signal head is has a 3-digit address, so it's 36.1 for the 36 is the milepost or control point, and then 1 is the first signal that I'm going to talk about at that location. The next thing is signal masts, and the first signals that we saw on my layout video was a single signal on a single mast, and it was just guarding a midpoint on the layout. But eventually, if you have signals at control points, you're going to have multiple signal heads on a mast. So right now we're going to go from tables, signals, and then we're going to select signal masts. And the next, this is what it initially looks like. We're going to look at the detail there. And we're going to create a username, which is going to involve the decoder address that you've given that particular signal head. Here you can see there's basic model signals, but we can also choose specific railroad signaling systems. The BNSF 1996 is what I use now, but when I first created the layout and the signaling system, it was the basic model signals. What's interesting is you can create one, modify it for the next, and if you save those, literally all you have to do is just decide which one you want to load for a particular session. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Of course, I can't just say CSX or Baltimore and Ohio, because those would be, they'd have different signals. So I use the basic signals. Now we're going to select the mast type. I'm sorry that I chose this one because it's a virtual signal, but it was a single searchlight high signal. Now at another control point, that was one we saw in one of the videos, control point 87.1, and it's a double searchlight high signal. And when I created this, I could see the last one I chose was a 36.1. So that's going to be the default, whatever your last one was. So you're going to click on this and then select the right one. I see another error here. That's 87.1. And if you do anything on a computer, if a period is a period, you can't use a comma. So everything has to be exactly the same. Just like when you identify your blocks, everything has to be spelled exactly the same every time, but that's the way computers compare information. Now you can see that I did select different control point signal head for that control point. And here again, now I'm controlling the lower signal head that's going to go on that double searchlight mast. So we have the eastbound, that's the main, that's the top signal, and then this is going to be the second signal, which is for diverging. Here, now we look at the layout. We select the crossover that we're going to look at. So this is going to be control point 86. It shows the blocks that are on all 4 sides of that control point. And we're going to say we're going to set the signal mask at that location. And then it brings up this screen, which shows all the different corners of that particular crossover. And you start selecting the signal head masks. They're going to go on the different corners. Sometimes I found out that, like, when I selected one, I got the wrong corner, and you can keep experimenting with it until you get the right one. That's a close-up example of the options. Now we're actually going to talk about the actual signals. This is the Santa Fe signal bridge. This is located at Ancona, Illinois, and it's the bridge on my layout. So it ended up looking pretty much the same. This is the BLMA etched metal signal bridge, and you can see that it's all etched metal. They suggest you use super glue to put together. Since it's etched metal, I've soldered it, and this has already been painted black, and I've already installed the signal heads on it. And that's the other side. Here's each of these is 4 different wires, so there's 12 wires coming off of this. I kind of like use a clothespin to hold the wires in place, and I use canopy glue, which is like a really thick Elmer's glue, just to kind of hold them down and just kind of progressively glue it little by little until I've got it all fastened. It's snug. It's another look at it. I paint over the wires. They're almost invisible. Of course, on a real signal bridge, that would be electrical conduit. This is the location where that signal bridge is going to be installed. These are little wooden pads that I just glued onto the layout and painted them color of concrete. This is where I'm going to put the little electrical cabinet that's going to hide my wires going down to the layout. That's where it's going to be located. I drilled holes out in the layout for it. This is a Grant, I think it's a Grant line electrical cabinet. And I literally screwed it down just like you would regular electrical box. I'm soldering the wires together for that'll go into that box. They're marked with a label maker. And now the wires are gone down through the layout. Tuck them in a little further. Hook it up to the signal bridge. Push the wires down in, and there you go. And if you think like, well, why are you doing the wires like that? That's all out there in front of God and everybody, but turns out that's the way they do it. There's a little electrical building there, and there's the wires that run up to the signal bridge. This is a larger signal bridge that's at the Joliet end of the layout. So I've got 4 signals facing each direction, which ended up being 32 wires. Everything has like a common wire, and then a red, a yellow, and a green wire for the different LEDs. That's what it looked like being installed on the layout. And there it is in operation. That's the Oregon kit. Is sometimes you can find it if you're shopping online, but they're out of production now unless somebody has bought it and is building it. These are the BLMA single mask, and they have just 4 little wires that go down the bottom, but it has a mounting pin. There's the 4 wires and a little plug that I just dropped down through the layout. There's the plug down below the layout. and they're plugged into the signal head decoders installed. There are a couple other ways that other people have done signal installations that I want to share with you. Online Model Railroad Hobbyist Magazine is a really good resource. This is an installation that was done by Larry Sebely, and basically he created his signals with pins at the bottom of it that just mount right into the layout. So here's his signal mast, and you can see the pins on the bottom. Any signals that I do now will have that kind of a wiring setup. Probably will still use that little electrical building, but it'll have its own pins, so I can just mount it right into the layout like that. I think that's pretty cool. That's what it looked like on his layout when he was done. A friend of mine in Germany, Jürgen Dietrich, also a Santa Fe modeler, is developing his own systems. He's using the same kind of system where he has the pins on the bottom of the signals. There's some of the ones he's created. That's how the under the layout looks like, where he's going to plug it in. I think that's pretty slick. This is a grade crossing module that has all the electronics and the motor drive that brings the signal down. Created this little metal box that it goes into, and it's installing it here in the layout. And he got this little, it's a small chainsaw. That's a chainsaw. He's from Germany, so I think you can get those here too. I did look, they're kind of expensive, but he was able to do a plunge cut there in the layout with the little chainsaw to create the place to mount that grade crossing signal. And there it is in his layout. He's got another box here that he's installing that it drops into. Signal hardware. This is getting harder and harder to find. Other ones besides what I use, the BLMA, there is Showcase Miniatures. They have some very good looking stuff in HO scale. There's an example of what one looks like. They don't come with the LEDs, but he sells you the LEDs that you can put in yourself. And I can't remember if they're already pre-wired or not, but that just gives you an idea of what size they are. Tomar has signaling signals as well. But like I said, these are getting harder and harder to find. BLMA, this is what I used. There you can see the etched metal brass components. BLMA was sold to Atlas, and Atlas has not reissued these, the Santa Fe signals bridge, the signal bridge or the cantilever. They've not done it. They've said they were going to a few years back, but it hasn't happened yet. They do, however, have some very nice looking modern signals, the Darth Vader hoods, I think that's what they're called. I think it's a gorgeous looking modern signal, but it just didn't fit what I want in my layout. NJ International, and turns out I've talked with the owner of the company just this week, and he's all sold out, and the fellow that he's talked to in China that made them for him doesn't seem to be interested in doing that for him right now. So the only way you're going to find those is if you're going to the internet and you find a hobby shop that still has some in stock, but not likely. That's one of their cantilevers, really nice looking kit. Custom signal systems, I found them on the internet. Looks like that might be a good provider. Almost all this is HO scale. Class 5 signals. When I was doing a presentation last year, they sent me one of these kits, and I started building one. I never really finished it, but I got it partway done. But it looks like a nice signal. That's what it looks like when it's built. That's one that the owner of the company made, not me. So that is my crew putting some of the last signals on the layout. And that's my presentation. So we can return back to can give my stop the screen share.
Well, Tom, before I turn it back to Fred, thank you so much. It was very enjoyable, and I know everybody got a big kick out of it. So thanks for taking the time and coming down to our division to give your talk. We really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. And I see my good friend Tom Hoback has been on this meeting too. And he and I are getting ready to look at signals on his layout right now. So that's going to be a fun thing to get into.
Yeah. And for Fred and I and Ron, we're ready to come back and play with you up there. So
Well,
Yeah, we have this refresher now. We're ready to operate.
yeah. I just am so much looking to the end of this COVID-19 thing so I can get people back to my layout. I miss having the opportunity to share the layout with others.
yeah, well, you and 100,000 other people.
No kidding.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome, and goodbye.
You
Yeah.
bet. Tom, thank you again from Division 8, and thank you to all the Division 8 members who attended today and to all the presenters as well. Hope to see you all at the Celebration Station on the 4th of October. That's a Sunday. And then a week after that on the 10th for the gathering. And of course, the business meeting and clinic a week after that on the 17th. Be safe, and we'll see you online.